The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to raise concerns about radical criminal justice policies being introduced and considered by the Liberal government. Right now, before the Minister of Justice is a report commissioned as part of the so-called Black Justice Strategy. And that report contains several radical policy proposals, including the decriminalization of a 30-day supply of hard drugs like meth, cocaine, and heroin. The Minister of Justice has not rejected this proposal, as one might hope. In fact, the Minister of Justice celebrated this proposal as, and I quote, history-making and an important milestone. It is unbelievable that the minister would celebrate policies that threaten to flood more drugs into our communities when one looks at our country's overdose statistics. Over 42,000 Canadians, including children, have died from drug overdoses under the Liberal Prime Minister's watch. The policy proposals in front of the Minister of Justice also include proposals to defund police departments by limiting their access to federal grant money and to reduce Canada's prison population through mass decarceration of 30% over the next 10 years. I am pleading, personally pleading, to please reject these policy proposals, that the Liberal government and its Justice Minister would reject these ideas as the harmful ideas they are and not to celebrate them as achievements. We have seen a massive increase in addictions and overdoses since the Liberals began to fund hard drugs with taxpayer dollars. We have seen an increase in crime when the Liberals made bail more accessible to repeat violent offenders. Police officers in our communities, including my home community of Durham, are doing their part. They're working hard to enforce the law, but they are being let down by laws and policies of the current federal government. Police want to do their jobs, but when they arrest somebody multiple times for multiple crimes, and that repeat offender is allowed back on the streets in short order, it undermines policing across our country. How could the minister celebrate a proposal to cut police budgets? Well, there is an ideological problem in the federal government right now. It's an ideology that has moved away from seeing the justice system as a system that ought to keep people safe and punish crime. Instead, there is an ideology running rampant all over this place that wants to weaken our justice system because it regards our system to be oppressive or racist. Some people call this ideology woke or far left. Whatever label you choose or don't choose, I hope we can recognize the system needs to work for the good of the Canadian people. Tearing it down to permit more crime and more chaos will not help any of us, no matter what color you are or where your parents come from. We need a strong system that is accountable, fair, and true to its core mission of public safety and justice. And with that core mission in mind, I return to my plea to the Liberal government and its Justice Minister. Please reject these radical criminal justice policies. Please reject these radical policy proposals. Canadians do not want more drugs flooding into our communities. We do not want violent repeat offenders to have easier access to bail. We want our police to be resourced and empowered to enforce the law. And I ask the minister to reject these radical policies and to side with law-abiding Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today is World Mental Health Day, which is an opportunity to shine a light on crucial yet often overlooked aspects of our lives, one being mental health at work. This year's theme reminds us that our workplaces must be safe with respect to our collective and individual mental and psychological well-beings. Our work environments are ever evolving and more dynamic than ever before. And as leaders, employers, and managers, we must all prioritize mental health just as we do physical health. Mental well-being is not a luxury. It's essential for productivity, for creativity, and overall workplace harmony. And when employees feel supported, valued, and understood, they thrive. Our government has collaborated with various Canadian mental health agencies to create policies and invest in programs that prevent mental health risks, promote well-being, and build supportive workplaces where mental health is prioritized. So on this World Mental Health Day, I'd like to say thank you to mental health workers of all kinds right across Canada. Mr. Speaker, I was asked to come to adjournment debate tonight to talk about mental health and addictions policy. And, oftentimes those sort of guardrails get a little bit stretched occasionally. But if the Member of Parliament for Durham would like to talk to the Minister of Justice or the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice, then he needs to indicate that. I came tonight to talk about mental health policy and measures that we've undertaken to address the overdose crisis. It's also important to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that when you're a government, Canadians of all walks of life, whether they are left or, as my colleague might label them, woke, centrist, more far on the right end of the spectrum, even if they're sometimes considered extreme, if they're academics, if they're workplace experts, or if they just have ideas, governments need to be open to good ideas, regardless of who those ideas are coming from. And we should invite good ideas. This place should be a contest of ideas, in fact. And we shouldn't, be afraid to criticize those ideas, but we shouldn't be closed-minded about hearing them either. And it seems as though in this place it's, similar to a debate that happened a couple of years ago where an organization suggested that the federal government consider taxing the equity of personal primary residences. It's a notion that our government soundly rejected. We didn't want to do that. Canadians don't want their primary residence home equity to be taxed. But since somebody brought it up at a meeting, the Conservatives ran with it and sent out a whole bunch of mail and said, look, these Liberals are trying to tax your home equity. It's not true. And the suggestions that my colleague have made with respect to policy recommendations made by a third party are also not true. I'm also certain that was a large document with multiple recommendations and suggestions. And as a government, we will remain open-minded to the good suggestions from academics, civil service organizations, groups of people, experts, because that's important to do as a government. But, Mr. Speaker, back to the issue of all the efforts that we've undertaken to address the overdose crisis. It includes efforts right across the continuum of care to prevent drug use, to reduce harms, to support people in accessing the treatment and recovery services that they need and deserve, and we remain committed to maintaining public safety throughout all of those enforcement efforts. Mr. Speaker, there are 4 aspects of drug policy and overdose crisis response that are all very important. It's like a table, and without any one of those 4 legs, that table falls down. It's prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and enforcement. And if any group or party or academic suggests that an effective drug policy can operate without all 4 of those aspects, then they are wrong. The Government of Canada has invested almost $200 billion over the last 10 years to support provinces and territories to deliver health services, in addition to the $1 billion that we've directly invested to invest in this and address this drug crisis, and will continue to be there for experts, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's return to some logic here for a moment. We have, in the last 9 years, lost 42,000 Canadians, including children, to drug overdoses. Some policy report comes across the Minister of Justice's desk saying to decriminalize hard drugs, a 30-day supply of hard drugs. Now, the logical response to that would be no, rejection. We are not going to be doing that. And that is what I'm asking the Liberal government to say. But what did they say when that policy proposal came to their desk? It was celebrated. The Minister of Justice, and I quote him directly, said openly in a press release, "This is an important milestone, history-making." That's not a logical response to a very serious problem. And what we need is specific vision and direction for how we're going to help struggling Canadians move forward, not to entertain more radical criminal justice policies. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we all have a role to play in stopping the spread of misinformation. And the Conservatives, over the last couple of years, have been tabloidizing a lot of things that they read out there in the ecosystem. Perhaps news isn't as reliable as it used to be, or perhaps some of the Conservatives are getting their news from less trustworthy sources, Mr. Speaker. But the truth is, on May 17th, 2024, we refused a request from Toronto Public Health to decriminalize the personal possession of controlled substances for people in Toronto, including youth. Health Canada reviewed all exemption requests carefully and thoroughly on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration and account all relevant options, including evidence of potential benefits and risks and harms to the health and safety of Canadians, and it was determined that the model proposed would not adequately protect public health and maintain public safety. Mr. Speaker, that was not 5 months ago, and the Member of Parliament for Durham is suggesting that something way more extreme than that is being considered, and it's not. That's misinformation.